Funding for this edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been provided by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Fidelco Group, the Russell Berry Foundation, Making a Difference, PSC&G, committed to providing safe, reliable energy now and in the future, GIBBONS PC, TD Bank, Johnson & Johnson, and by United Airlines. Promotional support provided by Jaffe Communications, supporting innovators and changemakers with public relations and creative services. And by AM 970 The Answer.
This is One-on-One. I'm an equal American just like you are.
The jobs of tomorrow are not the jobs of yesterday.
Look at this. You got this?
Here it is, man. Look at that.
Life without dance is boring.
I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are, there is always something to learn.
Do you enjoy talking politics?
No.
People call me because they feel nobody's paying attention.
Our culture, I don't think, has ever been tested the way it's being tested right now.
Such a good question. High five.
This is, in fact, Lessons in Leadership. We are talking leadership with the president of Seton Hall University, Dr. Joseph Nyre, who's been in leadership positions for more than a few years. Good to see you, Doctor.
Great to be with you, Steve.
You know, we're taping this interview in the middle of June. Things will change. Biggest leadership lesson you've learned in the midst of COVID-19 is?
The demonstration of integrity and leadership.
What does that mean?
We saw the higher education sector, particularly the Eastern Seaboard, take action as the virus came ashore. They took action before CDC guidance, took action before executive orders or government guidance in the best interest of the students and their faculty. They canceled study abroad. We were one of the first to do that. We closed our campuses and moved to remote learning without guidance from any form of government or from the CDC. We knew it would be a significant impact on the college's budgets, but colleges and universities up and down the Eastern Seaboard acted quickly in the best interest of our students and our employees.
Let me follow up on this. I said in a previous interview that we did for public broadcasting that my connection to the university is on several levels. And one of them is that I've taught a seminar on leadership and communication at the Buccino Leadership Institute, a big part of the university. And so I keep asking myself this question: to what extent do you believe leadership or leading in this pandemic winds up being an extraordinarily powerful, complex, and relevant case study for all students of leadership moving forward?
Undoubtedly, we'll be studying this for the next 10 to 15 years. The actions taken early to protect the health and well-being, to move from the hour-to-hour, day-to-day crisis management, to then the planning for the fall and beyond, required a multitude of leadership skills, leaders, and teams working together without clarity on multiple sets of contingency plans to ensure that the students' best interest and the faculty's best interest were brought to the fore.
But Doctor, when you say uncertainty, right? Here's what I keep thinking about, and I've been writing about this, teaching, and really struggling with it. And it's I keep saying our leaders need to be more strategic. And so, what does it mean to be strategic? I'm not going to get on my soapbox, don't worry. But I think to myself, think about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're going to get there is tactical. But a lot of that requires, Dr. Nyre, for you to know certain things, that there aren't so many variables, not the least of which is what is tomorrow going to bring. So here's my question. How the heck can really great leaders be as strategic as they need to be in the way they think if there are so many unknowns and so much uncertainty?
We have to set a course. Sometimes we have to set multiple courses. I've seen in our country over the last 10 to 15 years, you've seen it too, that if you change course, you're seen as someone that was weak or that you were flip-flopping. I think it's a sign of strength. So we had multiple teams working on multiple contingencies because of the uncertainty, because we weren't sure what path the virus would take. But I'll also share that we benefited from a colleague of mine who I trained with at Harvard Medical School, who helps lead the healthcare system in Spain. She and I spoke every morning for about 90 days in a row at 6:30 a.m. our time, because we knew that the virus was about 4 to 6 weeks ahead in Spain. And what they were experiencing that day, we might be experiencing 3, 4, 5 weeks down the road. And that sort of information, coupled with strong leaders and great teams, we're able to synthesize information and set contingency plans well into the future.
Quick follow-up on this. You come into Seton Hall as this is happening, right?
That's correct.
You're not there that long when things break.
That's right. And one could view that as an opportunity. I saw where we had struggles, and I also saw great leadership. It tested all of us and tested our team and tested us early. And I'm grateful for how the university's responded. I think they've done very well. We've done very well navigating a very difficult time.
So it's interesting. What I was actually going to ask, Doctor, is do you feel like, hey, because I've heard some people say this, oh, I got a bad break. Like, look, you take over the university as the president, and look at what I'm facing out of the box. You don't look at it that way. You say, listen, this is the hand that we have been dealt. My only job is to figure out how to play this hand as best I and we can. You block out all the other, hey, woe is me stuff?
Absolutely. I block all those things out and focus on the task at hand. And also the question on when the clouds do part and the pandemic lessens, how can we ensure we're better positioned than we were before we went into the pandemic? And that's where we're spending most of our time and most of our energy. And that's definitely how I view it.
You know, it's interesting. There are 2 leadership books that I promote go on our website. You'll see stand-deliver.com on our website. 2 books written by Dr. Spencer Johnson. One is Who Moved My Cheese? You know the book, right?
I do.
And the cheese is a metaphor for anything you want, and the cheese keeps moving. It's about change. The other one is Dr. Spencer Johnson's book, Peaks and Valleys, and managing the peaks when you're at the top. A sports team's at the top, and they say, hey, we're good, status quo, which you know isn't a plan, right? You can only go down from there. But the valley, if you consider a valley a really tough time, how do you manage that? Is the peaks and valleys metaphor appropriate for what we're talking about right now?
I do. I think it's a great metaphor. It's a bit like whitewater rafting combined with peaks and valleys. And we're moving through a difficult space that, again, we have more clarity now than we did 3 weeks ago. But this could all turn tomorrow because the virus, we've seen many twists and turns. So I do think the peaks and valleys metaphor is a great metaphor. And we're also trying to ensure that we're not living from one eruption to another, right? And we've seen that in another pandemic in our country recently.
Yeah, my last question. I asked virtually every leader, including Dr. Brian Price over at the Buccino Leadership Institute and Pat Lyons, your colleague, who was on Lessons in Leadership. I dance around this question. Sometimes I ask it very directly because I think about it myself. How, as a leader, particularly in times of crisis, how do we exude confidence when sometimes deep inside we feel insecurities and fear and anxiety? How do you do it?
Honesty and compassion. I think that in times of uncertainty and great stress, having people that are honest and demonstrate compassion and that are leaning forward helps us all move through what can be a wildly stressful period. And I think those elements are critical.
Yeah. You know what? I lied. One more quick question. Myles Powell. Those of us who are Seton Hall University basketball fans love watching him for the 4 years that he played at Seton Hall. And one of the things that struck me beyond his play on the court is the kind of leader he was and is. Camaraderie, giving credit to other people, enthusiasm. Am I overestimating Myles Powell as a leader?
No, I think you're right on the mark. He's a leader, and even in difficult times, nights of big losses, he was there when a young fan would come up to him after the game and want to say hello or want to greet him. So dealing with great challenges on the court and off the court, he was there for the community, and the community is greater than his team. He was there for the community of Seton Hall and all who follow Seton Hall. Hey, just real quick, if I could, we're playing Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt, and we're winning the game. It was a big win for us this season, and Coach pulled Myles out, and Coach Willard did, and Myles Powell on the sidelines his senior year playing Vanderbilt. is cheering and cheering and cheering for his teammates, not frustrated that he was pulled out of the game, because he knew that he was part of a team and that whether he's on the court or off the court, he plays a role. And I think that's a demonstration of integrity.
That's leadership, that's integrity, and that's why we do lessons in leadership. Dr. Nyre, thanks so much for joining us. All the best.
Great to be with you, Steve.
You got it. We'll be right back after this.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Hi, welcome to Uncut. I'm Steve Adubato, a series of in-depth conversations with the people who matter and make decisions every day that affect our lives. We're honored to be joined by Mayor Ras Baraka, the great city of Newark. Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Question. You're going to see a graphic when people see this. It's going to it's called Confronting Racism. It's a series of conversations that we're having, trying to confront racism. What does it mean to you, for us in the media, to consistently and legitimately and meaningfully, quote, confront racism?
Well, I think every institution in America has been infected with racism and white supremacy, and that includes the media. If you look at the major media conglomerates and companies, many of the people on the editorial board, the ownership, are not people of color. I think that it means to put these issues at the forefront as well, to have discussions about them, to talk about them honestly and frankly, and begin to go to these communities and talk to people in the community about these very poignant and serious issues, and not just like find somebody that agrees and find somebody that disagrees and have them go at it with one another, which is really what happens. The mayor says something, you'll find somebody in the community that disagrees with them, and you put them at each other.
That's not real. That's entertainment. That's not real. But Mr. Mayor, let me ask you this. You and I have known each other a long time. Our dads, leaders in the city of Newark. Your father, a great civil rights leader, a poet, an activist, somebody who made such a difference. My dad involved in the city as well during the 60s in Newark, 70s, beyond. I don't even know if they talked honestly or comfortably about race, but it was always there. It's always been in the city. It's always been in this country. My question to you is this. Why do you think it's so hard for so many of us, black, white, brown, to have honest, sometimes uncomfortable, difficult conversations about race, racism, and race relations?
Well, I think it's difficult to have uncomfortable conversations, period, right, about anything. So when we start talking about race, it gets worse because things are happening now. It's still happening. It's not something that we're talking about that's in the past that may be easier for us to have a discussion about. These are things that are happening, and there are people who are benefiting. Like, people benefit from this. They have a privilege around these specific things, and a lot of people are not willing to give up their privilege. They're not willing to have these kind of discussions. They feel kind of like you're making them responsible. You're making them accountable and guilty for things that are going on. And also, in terms of my community, there are people who are afraid of these tense situations as well. They want to preserve their job, preserve their position. And so it's difficult to have real, honest conversations about it that are going to turn out to mean something impactful for our community.
To what degree, Mayor Baraka, do you believe that this moment, we're taping in the middle of June, it'll be seen after that there's really something, quote, different about this time, about this moment, that the George Floyd horrific murder on camera and others since then, including in Atlanta, and God knows when this will be seen. I'm praying and hoping, as you are, that there's not another public incident. But there is something to be said for having it on camera, because otherwise we don't know what people would, even when they see it, by the way, some people don't believe they just saw what they just saw. But that being said, my question to you, Mr. Mayor, is, do you really believe this is a moment where some meaningful reform, restructuring, change, meaningful change about race, racism, institutional racism can be dealt with and confronted for real?
Yeah, we have an opportunity. I've been calling it the Noah moment. We just have to be willing to build
the what?
Our Noah moment. You know what I mean? Like, we just have to have the conviction to build the ship. Go someplace else, to start something different. This, to me, it's like the death of Emmett Till, right? African Americans have been lynched for way before Emmett Till's death, and then Emmett Till's mother portrays it, makes it public, and people see how horrific it is, and it sparks the whole entire civil rights movement. And I think this death of George Floyd in the middle of the COVID pandemic had everybody home, no sports, no entertainment, no Broadway, no TV. And so people were forced to stand still and pay attention to this thing, this moment that took place, this terrible and horrific thing. And so now you don't have any choice really but to react and respond to it.
Finally, we do a lot of programming around leadership. We have a sister program called Lessons in Leadership. And I've always been wanting to ask you this. You're a former high school principal at the great Central High School. You're the mayor of a huge city with a diverse, complex population with a whole range of challenges and issues. Do you have a leadership guidebook that you turn to in crisis like this?
Not really, man. I just, I would say a lot of the books that I read as a principal are applicable, in terms of, trying to manage and organize the city hall and make sure we're responsive from the fifth discipline or good to great or books like that the
classics
I've used to that I've used to help me organize myself as a principal. Some of those things are applicable in this setting, but also like just regular books that I've read over the years. Books about transformation, about change, about revolution, about activism, about oppressed people, about transforming societies and communities have all been helpful in keeping me focused on what it is that we need to accomplish in the end. Because there's so many distractions, Steve, that it's easy to start working on something else or forget about what the overall goal and end to this is.
Final question. I've known you a long time, and you never seem, no matter what you're feeling or thinking internally, to show it. That great expression, never let them see you sweat. And I'm not saying this because you're a friend, but I've never seen you sweat. And here's my question. Is that intentional on your part, no matter what is going on, no matter what crisis, no matter what difficulty, no matter what conflict, when you are leading, you don't let people see that you're panicked in the least? What's really going on?
Yeah, it's a lot of prayer, man. That's what it is. A lot of prayer. And I'm serious, man. Just real focus. And ultimately I get into the moment. It's like any athlete about to play a serious game. You get focused before the game starts, but when you're in the game, you're in the moment. And that's basically what it is. I get focused. I pray. I do the things that I need to do, and then when the moment comes, it just happens. And I'm focused on that. And I prepare myself to be focused.
Mayor Ras Baraka of Newark, New Jersey, my hometown, his hometown, a city that deals with all kinds of difficult challenges every day, and the city's lucky to have the mayor, as its leader. Thank you, Mayor Ras Baraka. We're honored by you joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Be right back after this.
To watch more one-on-one with Steve Adubato, find us online and follow us on social media.
Welcome to Uncut. I'm Steve Adubato. We're honored to be joined by Dr. Nancy Cantor, Chancellor of Rutgers University-Newark, my alma mater. It is a great university, to say the least. And Nancy, I want to do this. You joined us on our public television conversation, talked about race on Confronting Racism, a series we're doing called Confronting Racism. But here's my question to you right now. Why do you think it's so hard for so many of us, white, black, and brown, to talk honestly, painfully, but in a very real way about race and, more importantly, racism? Why is it so hard? People say, don't talk about that.
As a social psychologist, I've thought about this question my entire career, and I can't quite figure it out. And I go back to my childhood riding the subways in New York City. And it was natural to talk about race and culture and language because everybody was there, right? It wasn't split off. The neighborhoods were mixed. The neighborhoods had people of wealth and they had people of poverty. The neighborhoods had people. who saw each other as people. The problem for us, and the racial wealth gap really shows this, is that we have divided so extraordinarily now.
Are we more segregated than ever, doctor?
We are more segregated than ever. Do you know that New Jersey schools are more segregated than the Southern schools when Brown v. Board?
1954 Brown versus Board of Education, more segregated than then?
Then came after that. Yep.
And by the way, you're talking about a university, Rutgers University-Newark, I know well, the most diverse, one of the most diverse campuses in the nation, according to U.S. News and World Report. Am I wrong on that?
You are absolutely right.
So what does diversity bring us, Nancy?
But that one I'll take.
Okay, what is diversity? People say diversity, some people say diversity is overrated. What does diversity bring us?
Yeah, so, I want to talk about diversity versus race because people are getting into that conversation. And I think it's actually very, very important. One of the things that diversity can do is it can take you down a path where you smooth out everything, right? Oh, there are all these differences of opinion, differences of this, differences of that. And that allows you to paper over racial inequity and systemic racism that keeps us apart. On the other hand, if you take a really substantive view of diversity, you think about the intersectionality that unpacks race. I mean, one of the most interesting things in this country has been the degree to which race and immigration status have combined, right? So when we think about our documented and our undocumented students, they come from Black and brown families from all kinds of cultural and faith and racial backgrounds.
Nancy, stay right there. So when President Trump said, we don't need more people from those S-hole countries, we know where he was talking about. Is that a dog whistle? Forget about a dog whistle. That's a very loud shout and a whistle to those who feel a certain way, or am I mischaracterizing that?
I couldn't agree more. I think that's one of the most racist statements in the world, and I'll probably get in trouble for saying it. But there is no question in my mind that when you say that about immigration, you're talking about race.
And the president says, I'm not at all talking about race. I'm just talking about having people come here who have more to offer our country. And I think he's talking, they're already well-educated, economically, they can pay taxes. And
undocumented New Jerseyans pay millions and millions of dollars in taxes. My undocumented students will create businesses. They will create artistic, civic life in this country. They will be the future. And, I don't know who he's thinking is going to be our future, because it sure isn't going to be our past.
Yeah. Nancy, what are the reasons for us to be optimistic about race relations, racism moving forward?
The hope of our nation at this very moment is the next generation. Those are the change makers. And they have come from many different paths. I look at our students. I look at our students who have re-entered education after being in prison, and what they have to contribute is extraordinary. I look at our students who have undocumented families, and what they have to contribute is incredible. I look at our Black Lives Matter students, and they know the history of racial segregation in this country, and they know they don't want to see that anymore.
Right.
So that's the hope. But let me remind everybody, we are not going to build a healthy society unless those students have opportunities. If we don't invest in education, in entrepreneurship, in housing, in opportunities for safety and health, we are not going to use their talent, and we won't build a better world.
Well
But
said.
We could.
That's Dr. Nancy Cantor, who is the Chancellor of Rutgers University-Newark. The university is fortunate to have her. The state is fortunate to have her. We all are. Nancy, thank you, my friend. You shed great light and offered important wisdom. All the best, Nancy.
Thank you, you too.
I'm Steve Adubato. Catch you next time.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the CAUCUS Educational Corporation. Funding has been provided by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, RWJ Barnabas Health, the Fidelco Group, the Russell Berry Foundation, PSC&G, Gibbons PC, TD Bank, Johnson & Johnson, and by United Airlines. Promotional support provided by Jaffe Communications and by AM 970 The Answer.
Hi, I'm Eric. You might see me as an ordinary person, but I've been living with a brain injury for nearly 2 years. One of my struggles is short-term memory loss. At Opportunity Project, I'm given hope and support, and I've gained my confidence back through the job placement program. Despite my challenges, I have a reason to keep improving. Today, even though life has changed me, I believe that anything is possible.
If you have a brain injury, you don't have to face your road to recovery alone.